Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy podcast. My name is Jed and we are doing philosophical midwifery again today. Yesterday, or the last stream, we took a break from the book to we did a review of the first 4 chapters of the philosophical midwifery book. We're on the 5th chapter at the moment. And my audio sounds funny. Let me just fix that. That goes there, and this goes here. There we go. There we go. There we go. All right, I think we're good. So we did a review of the first 4 chapters leading up to chapter 5 where we are today. And chapter 5, of course, is the case study. So we've got a lot of definition under our belt, and now we're doing some demonstration of what it's like for people to go through this very art that we're learning. Now, in the case study that we're reading, case study B, we saw the fellow, Mr. B, realize that even with the evidence laid out in front of him, even with understanding and even with experience, he still believes the opposite to be the case. This is key. This is crucial. This is fundamental to understanding the nature of human problems. The cause of human problems seems to be functioning irregardless of evidence and reason. Even evidence and reason we understand to be true ourselves. It doesn't change our mind. It doesn't change our mind. It doesn't change how we feel. It doesn't change how we function or act in the world. This is key. This is the human experience. In the human experience, we all get a class of belief called a pathologos that we have been learning all about so far in the last, I think, about 90-something episodes. That causes our problems, causes us to act in an irrational way. And isn't changed with evidence, reason, and even understanding. It blocks us from participating in even our own understanding. This is key. Now, hey, welcome. The undemolishable midwife. Yes, thank you, Reeve. I was playing music last night. On the weekend, I go out and play music for the people. And generally, I make people's lives better. But tonight, tonight, there was a fellow who insisted he play my guitar. And even when I was packing up to leave because of his negative vibes, he physically assaulted me. And then, as I got away, he went for my guitar. So I had to protect my guitar. And I got put into a chokehold, I got thrown through a window, and his friends decided that it would be a good idea to join in, and the wonderful people sitting nearby seemed to not give a shit about what was happening and didn't even help. So that sucked, and I got punched in the face by this real piece of work. After I got away, there was a cop car coming past and I flagged him down, and he thought the best response to the situation was to laugh at me. Not only laugh at me with the 3 people who beat me up for the crime of playing music for them that they asked for, that they were enjoying, that they were singing along with, until one person, if you want to call them that, decided it would be a good idea to try and take my guitar and fight me. Normally I'd just run or get away from that kind of situation, except he had my guitar, so I had to come back for that. And yeah, great experience. What was interesting is I was very angry at myself for putting myself in that situation to begin with. Why didn't I see the signs before it came to that situation? The two people I was playing for before the assaultant sat down, his first statement was a criticism. Do you want to tune your guitar? His next input was, let me show you how to, you're not playing that song right, let me show you how to play it. Now in the future, as soon as that happens, I'm out the door. Also, another mistake I made was telling him, oh well, and as it escalated, he began insulting me. And so I said, oh, now you're insulting me, I'm out of here. Next time I'll lie to that sort of a person. And I'll say, oh, what's that? My mum's calling me. I better, whatever. So, really shitty situation. I haven't been physically punched in the face before. Well, I've been sharing music with people. That's a real shock to the system. Yeah, so although music is one of the things that I encourage people to do in philosophical midwifery, because it's an art, it's something a lot of people can enjoy, it can be challenging, and you can always keep going forward. So as we reach certain goals, and in doing so we surface some clues about our own pathologos, you can always reach a higher goal. Also, another reason why music's a good idea is often we have a love for music when we're young and our parents crush it. Or we pick up a pathologos that results in us crushing our own love of music. So when I was learning philosophical midwifery with the author of this book in California, he would often encourage people to pick up an instrument or pick up the instrument that they put down when they were young. So a lot of people say, oh wow, you're a musician, it's really good that you're doing something you love. And that's not the case for me. It's a real challenge. I'm not playing music because I love it. I'm playing music because it's something that can challenge me, surface my pathologos, but also it's part of the instructions that I get from my Dream Master. And as we're learning on this channel, our Dream Master is our guru. It's our guide. So that's not to say I never love it. There are states of mind that I enjoy. There's some great things about it. Yeah, my experience is kind of a weird one with music. I was, I think, born a philosopher. I've had to learn philosophy on my own in Australia. I've had to learn philosophical midwifery pretty much on my own. I've midwifed a ton of people over the last 20 years, but it's always very challenging, and I've always been on my own. It takes a certain class of person to be open-minded and curious enough and courageous enough and truth-seeking enough to get into this game. And there aren't a lot of people like that in Australia. And as we are learning, as we gain insights, we have a counterattack. We undermine our own insights, we undermine our own experiences, but also as we separate from our family group loyalty to a shared ignorance, they will try and drag us back. So it's been a dangerous life for me, in that learning the art of philosophical midwifery by helping people to understand their problems, remove their blocks, has resulted in a lot of people turning around and counterattacking me, the person who helped them. Or quite often, their whole fucking family would show up to counterattack me. Or they'd set up these elaborate schemes to try and catch me in a mistake. Or they would just lie and slander about me. For the terrible, terrible crime of helping them when they asked me to. Helping them gain insight and understanding. So, my experience of the human condition has been a pretty terrible most of the time. Now, not all the time, of course. I was very lucky to come across Pierre Grimes, someone who also had a love of understanding. And I'm very, very fortunate to be able to read the Balboa translations of Socrates, to be able to read the words and participate in the dialogues from somebody else, thumbs up, who had a love of understanding. But yeah, pretty much growing up in Australia in a period of history where we are still on the barbarian side of evolution. We are still fiercely loyal to our false beliefs. And those false beliefs are specifically opposed to understanding. We have to make that jump across that evolutionary divide. And it is a divide. It's not a continuum. Human condition consists of trials. Yeah, that's impressive that you could go that far into Socrates' thinking on your own. Yeah, well, thank you. That's very nice of you to say. Yeah, I mean, I'm very, very fortunate that I came across Pierre Grimes' videos on YouTube. And if you have a love of understanding, or if, you're hanging out and you get really high, check out the PRS videos from about 95, 96, 97. As a series, and you can find them for free on YouTube. PRS videos, Pierre Grimes, and there's about 100 episodes where he goes through, I think it's 50-50, dream analysis and philosophy. They are like symphonies of logos. Pretty amazing. Rare are people on Earth who truly want to seriously engage in philosophy. Yes, very rare. I mean, I learned the hard way how rare it was, because as soon as I discovered, oh shit, you can understand problems, everyone would want to figure this out. You can solve problems. All problems are understandable. And going through the process of understanding your problems, you learn an art of how to think. That's amazing. And it's the same art of how to read properly. Not interpretation or guess what teacher wants, but actually read. That's amazing. And that same process you can apply to your dreams. Not only that, once you gain a freedom from your blocks or problems, you can use that same art of understanding that you've been learning to understand the nature of self and reality. Spirituality doesn't have to be a mysterious thing or just a matter of opinions or personal beliefs, or you don't have to pick between Buddhism and Taoism and Hinduism. You can actually just understand all of it, and it's fun, and everyone can play. Surely everyone would want to hear about this. Fuck no. No one wants to hear about this. And if you dare speak up about it, you will be targeted, is something that I learned in the first half of my life. So, I'm getting behind in chat. Let me catch up. Which is interesting, but hopefully we can change that. We have a community here, and we have the internet, and we have Twitch and YouTube. And maybe we are going through, we have the work of Pierre Grimes. He had to do a lot of this on his own, although he developed the Noetic Society, a bunch of friends around him. And he was friends with Alan Watts, of course. He was probably a great person to be friends with. But we have all his work, and he was a fucking genius. He added to Socrates. He rediscovered midwifery, and then realized, oh shit, this was in Homer. This was what Socrates was. Plato didn't write about midwifery, and there's a reason for that. But there are stories of Socrates talking to everyday people going through midwifery. He didn't just talk to the people who Plato wrote about. So very fortunate to have his work. So maybe as we grow and as humanity hurtles towards its extinction as a result of people not realizing that we are here to remove the false beliefs that blind us from maturity, evidence, and reason and care, to the point where people maybe wake up and realize, shit, maybe it's time to put aside our loyalty to religion and family tradition and whatever the fuck, political affiliation, and start to grow up and address the cause of human problems, because we don't have time to do otherwise. So, hopefully this community will grow and this way of being will be something that we can spread throughout the world and save our species. Maybe 1 in a million would be an overestimation. Most people don't even want to bother in understanding. What matters is to show the ideas that comfort them and to promote their social status. Yeah, isn't that? Yeah. And that's always been a puzzle to me. It doesn't make sense to me. It really doesn't. Like, to me, it's just mind-boggling. Like, don't you love to understand how to ride a bike better than just falling off your bike? The more you understand the video game, the more joy you can find in it. The more you understand music, the more beauty you can see in it. The more you understand your girlfriend, the more beauty you can see in them. The greater depth of beauty, higher levels of beauty. Maybe they were a pretty face to begin with, but the more you understand them, the more you can see the beauty of their soul, their mind, and maybe even a transcendent beauty beyond all of that. So it just, although in saying that, I have to recognize that, yeah, it is a rare thing, even though it doesn't seem like it seems absurd to me. But I mean, that's probably the same for a lot of things. People who love cooking probably seems absurd that everyone doesn't love cooking. People who are really great at sports, it's like probably seems absurd that people aren't naturally gifted at throwing a baseball or... So, yeah. Even amongst professional philosophers, I think people want to learn by heart a few philosophical sentences and be done with it, using these sentences to promote their status. That's it. Yeah. I mean, I look for philosophers online and on YouTube, and I even did philosophy at college, and it was garbage. It's all garbage. It's literally what we read in the Phaedo, what Socrates, and in the Republic. We haven't run the Republic together yet here. But Socrates says it's just philadoxia. These people who claim to be philosophers are philadoxias. They love opinions. That's it. And they're not learning the dialectic. They're doing debates. That's philonikos, love of fighting, love of conflict. And you're right, yeah, they learn a few catchphrases and sentences and quotes, which is just enough to justify the pathologos beliefs that they got from childhood. That's it. That's what we're learning on the channel. That's why midwifery is so important. Because unless we do philosophical midwifery to surface the unsuspected false belief about ourselves and reality that all human beings get from childhood, then our whole life becomes nothing other than the justification of that ignorance, the further solidifying of that ignorance, the identifying yourself with that ignorance. And you're right, that's what philosophy is. How can you sound smart while you justify your ignorance and injustice? But you tell them that, not me. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of being punched in the head. Hell is other people. Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a double-edged sword, right? There is a joy in being able to reflect with you guys here in chat, guys and gals, of course. And there is a coming across somebody who does have a love of understanding. It shines in the fog. Socrates calls it a barbaric fog of ignorance. That's where human beings are. That's where we begin as individuals, and we wake up from that through this process of midwifery, philosophy, and dream analysis, and sharing it as well. 4 parts. Socrates' story also is a warning. Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't make sense to you because you're a being that wishes to understand. That's a prerequisite for Socrates. Praxis? I've heard that word before. Was that you who told me that word? I forgot it. Let me look it up. Process of putting a theory, idea, or skill into practice or action. Ah, interesting. Cool word. I doubt that the wish to understand is in every human being. In fact, I strongly doubt it. Praxis is in Greek. I don't know how it's written in Greek, though. Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, it's 2 sides of the divide. Understanding solves problems. Understanding, we know that. We love to understand things that we're interested in. We love to understand computers if you're a computer guy. We love to understand, I'll tell you what though, the dumbest people in the world show an exceptional level of understanding of football. They can quote stats. They memorize plays. They follow people from high school. They know the stats of this quarterback from high school. It's remarkable the level of understanding they have for what they're interested in, what they love. But the question of chapter 1 in this book that Pierre Grimes had was, how can we be so mature and rational when it comes to so many other things, but not ourselves? That's the key difference. That's the pathologos. It's not a false belief about football. It's a false belief about you, what you are. You, the one listening to this. So why aren't we developing an understanding about the self? Well, in the description of of the studies of the Philosopher King in Book 7 of the Republic, Socrates says, you know what? There are no teachers of this. Do you know why? Because there are no students of this. Do you know why? Because everyone thinks they know what the self is. So who's out there looking for a teacher of the self? Who's willing to go through the process of understanding the self if they already think they know? Why understand? Why learn about something you already think you've got all figured out? So add to that what we're learning about the pathologos, that the thing we are most fiercely loyal to is a fundamental false belief about ourself and reality that binds us together with the ignorance of our family that we love, that we were dependent upon. You know those Fast and Furious movies? What does he say? It's family. Family is number one. I will fight for family. I will shoot you for family. I will race my cars into space for family. Why? They're just people. They're not wiser than the family next door. Makes no sense. They're no wiser than the family across the street. The idea of love that binds the family is no more true or no less unjust than the racist family up the block, the cult family down the road, the people with the weird religion in the other country. So why is family the most important thing? Says human beings. That's the problem. We can trace it back to the cave. Before we had developed language and the ability to reflect with reason for ourselves, it was the human beings that were fiercely loyal to their tribe, to their cave, and had blind loyalty to tribe leader, and was deathly afraid of everything outside the cave. Anything different from the cave was bad and evil. They're the human beings that survived saber-toothed tigers, that survived evolving until we could reflect. So that's the historical origin to the nature of this ridiculous ignorance that binds us to the cause of our problems, makes us most fiercely loyal to the cause of our suffering, makes us fight against anything that shows us our injustice is wrong, is not true. It's evolutionary. In other words, it served a purpose at one stage, but it no longer serves us. It's a vestigial limb, if that makes sense. Gotta cut it off. Equally, within the individual, the taking the blame, for our parental figures that we were dependent upon, that if we saw them for what they were really doing to us, it would be too crushing for an infant to see. It did serve a purpose in our survival. It kept us alive. So evolutionarily speaking, the pathologos served a purpose but no longer does. And within our individual, within our lifetime, so too. Hey, if this is where dad or mum was showing themselves most completely and they seem so adamant when I was just asking a question, imagine if I challenged that reaction. They could kill you. But we're out of the house now. We're adults now. Or if you're a good kind of adult with children, you are going with your children in a relationship to learn a new way of being together. So, it is puzzling, but we can also understand it. And I suppose the flip side of that is when we do have people who do have a love of understanding or a curiosity about awakening their own love of understanding, or a desire to do good in the world, or a desire to make sense of why we are not solving obvious problems like genocide or capitalism or corruption in politics. Why? We don't need that. That's silly. When we do have those sorts of people that do think in that way, I guess we can say that they are wonderful and they're the best chatters in the world. So, but yeah, for me, music, I'm going on a big personal thing today, but who cares? For me, music has been a kind of safety net for me. Having a love of understanding in a world that hasn't yet made the transition from a love of ignorant beliefs to a love of understanding makes me a target. That's what the pathologos does. It targets the logos. But when I started carrying a guitar on my back, people would smile. So it provided me a little bit of safety. Up until last night. But again, the frustration that I was feeling was more at how can I see the puzzle there to be seen? In other words, there must have been a reason for me to experience this injustice that makes that situation just. In other words, what blocked me from recognizing the problem before it eventuated? Why was I playing music for these sorts of people in that sort of place? Why didn't I move as soon as the guy started being negative? And when I did move, why did I feel the need to tell the truth? Why didn't I just say, oh shit, you are the best people ever, but I gotta catch a tram? Why did I say, oh wow, I don't feel great when you're insulting me for playing music for you? And when he started getting violent, I don't know, could I have moved quicker to get my guitar? So that's the whole point. Philosophical midwifery is a way of creating the conditions for those reflections. You're not supposed to get it right. You're supposed to have problems. If you're not having problems, you're not going hard enough. Or you're not reaching, that's a colloquialism, you're not reaching for your highest goals with excellence. We want to surface problems. The difference is, with philosophical midwifery, you have someone to talk to about those problems. Talk to in a certain way, which means you can actually solve the problems. That's the difference. So you can say human suffering is when you have a problem and you experience the pain of that problem. Hey, pain's not suffering. Pain and suffering are different things. You have pain going through a problem. But suffering happens. Think of it this way. You have pain when you go to a dentist, but that's not suffering. If you're in the dentist chair and you look over on the wall and you see a newspaper clipping, notorious sadist, serial murderer escapes from prison with dentist uniform. Uh-oh, now it's suffering. In other words, there's no goodness gonna come from this pain that you're gonna be experiencing on the dentist chair. He's a sadist. There's no benefit. And without a philosophical midwife or a philosophical midwifery relationship with a friend or a partner, then the pain is just suffering. It's gonna repeat. I'm gonna get in the same situation next week or something like that, or next time. But if there is a way of ousia, reflection, self-reflection, through the logos, not in a way that confirms your prejudices, oh, that's because I'm an idiot, or that's because, I don't know, tall people suck, or something like that. No, that's not self-reflection. That's not self-reflection through the logos. Philosophical midwifery is to create a relationship, a conversation, where you create the ideal conditions for self-reflection through the logos, by being guided by the dialectic, so that every situation can be a potential doorway to the richest insights into our own self and the very puzzle we're here to solve. It's philosophical midwifery. It's this way of being and having others in our life where we can share this way of being. That's what turns suffering into mere pain. It's what turns problems into puzzles. That's the difference. That's the significance of this way of being. Let's catch up with the chat. A reason works if you believe in destiny, which is irrational, supernatural. Wouldn't the right question be, is there an opportunity for fruitful reasoning coming from this experience, or would my mind be better elsewhere? So that's it. So in philosophy, what we're recognizing is, if understanding is universal, in other words, if all human beings or all sentient beings can evolve to the stage of language and self-reflection, then they have the potential for a pathologos, but they also have the potential for understanding. Therefore, if understanding is universal, everyone can share in it, it universally benefits, so it's universal and beneficial, then we can say it's a principle. And if it's a universal principle that we are being guided towards, we could say it's our purpose or destiny. Now we can go beyond that and say, hey, what is our highest purpose? Well, our purpose or destiny for all human beings is midwifery, because it's the learning of understanding to find what binds us to our suffering, to our ignorance, prevents our evolution, but also that same dianoia, love of understanding, Philadionoia, awakens us to know nous. So that's the philosophy. So midwifery opens you to philosophy. Philosophy is the study of wisdom, or nous, pure being, which is eternal. So you could say our purpose, everyone with mind, is to remember mind, or re-experience pure being. But also, Socrates says, hey, by the way, beyond philosophy, there's philophronesis. Because we have to wonder, what's the cause of even pure being, even nous? What's the self? Therefore, the fundamental purpose to all beings is to know the self, making it our destiny. We call it in philosophy the destiny of man, because it's not just your destiny or my destiny or Socrates' destiny, it's the purpose of all sentient beings. Now, destiny is in opposition to fate. If we do not challenge our false beliefs, we are predestined to repeat the same cycles to the same disastrous end. So one way of understanding the love of philosophy is the freedom from the chains of fate, as Socrates calls it, to discover our highest purpose or destiny, the destiny of man, which isn't supernatural in that the class of belief that cannot be proven. This is entirely verifiable through understanding, confirmed in nous, awakening intelligence, awakening the capacity of ousia to know reality itself. That's the subject of the dialectic in philosophy. And then the next use of the dialectic, there are two dialectics described in the Republic, in Book 6 and Book 7. The higher use of the dialectic, once we've used the dialectic in midwifery to free ourselves from our fate, once we've used the dialectic to experience nous, once we've used the dialectic to nail down the aspects of nous, like beauty and justice, so we can use it, then there's a higher function of the dialectic in Book 7 of the Republic to use the dialectic, or the systematic structure of reflection and understanding, to move from nous, or the second hypothesis of Parmenides, pure being, to the first hypothesis, from the experience of the self to the one self. So it's all verifiable. Now, the question is, if the experience of nous, or pure being, is knowledge, how would you describe the way we apprehend the self? if the self is the cause of knowingness, how can you know that which is beyond knowledge? That's the fundamental question, puzzle of phronesis. If destiny is to know thyself, how the heck do you know something which is the cause of knowledge? That's a huge puzzle. That's one of the big ones. The real is infinite in length and in depth. Right, so that's another puzzle. Because the experience of nous is finite. There is an end. There is an experience. And it's all at once. Understanding, you can always add to your understanding, of course. So you could say understanding is infinite. You can always make new connections. But the experience of nous, or the awakening of your ousia, that's a finite thing. Now, what's amazing about it is, in the second hypothesis of Parmenides, the words used to describe it is the terms of the self-logos, or the self-ers. And two of those terms is finite and infinite. Now, one of the cool things about all of the different levels of reality, or the levels of evolution, is he uses the same terms. In the Parmenides, so the Parmenides we read last time at the end of book 4, chapter 4 of the midwifery book, Proclus, another philosopher, describes Parmenides as Socrates' midwife. And he gives 9 levels of reality, 9 hypotheses. The first one, he says, is the real one, the self, his self, the one self. And then he gives 8 other ones. Now, what's fascinating about that is, first of all, it encapsulates all 8 other possible ways of thinking. You got nihilism in there, you got materialism in there, you got reductionism in there, you've got socialism in there, you've got Catholicism in there, you've got dualism in there. It's all within these 8 hypotheses. What's also fascinating about it is it's the same terms. He uses the same terms all the way through, just in different ways. And 2 of those terms is infinite and finite. So the second hypothesis, the experience of nous, or being. So the first hypothesis is that one that's beyond knowing, the self, you. Whatever experience you have, whatever way of thinking that you grow into, there has to be something experiencing that, which has to itself be transcendent of experience, to be able to have experiences. That's the self. That's what we're after. That's our destiny, our highest purpose, universally. Now, one of the things Pierre Grimes left us before he shuffled off his mortal coil is, hey, by the way, there is a level, or there are levels beyond the first hypothesis of Parmenides, which is, like, he spent his whole life, all 99 years of it, bringing everyone else up to the level where we could read the first hypothesis. Literally, the last year of his life in his class that I was in, he was still introducing us into how to read the first hypothesis. We were still making leaps. And then he gives an interview before he passed on, saying, oh, by the way, there's levels beyond the hypotheses of Parmenides. Holy shit. Anyway, I'm getting a bit off track. 2 of those terms used in the hypotheses is finite and infinite. Let me give you an example. In the second hypothesis, the greatest experience, what if you experienced infinite together with its partner, finite? In other words, what if you could somehow know with your consciousness everything forever in that direction, and in that direction, and in that direction, and in that direction, like a sphere? What if you could know infinity like that? But if it was infinite that you were knowing, then there could be nothing outside of it, because it's literally infinite. Meaning you're grasping infinite, but if there's nothing outside, it's completely self-contained or finite. So one way that people have described a peak experience, people who have had this experience in various different ways, meditation, whatever. One way it's described by some people is infinity all at once. Or what we would use with a more accurate use of language or logos is the self pair of finite and infinite in their ultimate states unified. Now, if that's the way of making sense of the second hypothesis, the brilliant light of pure being, can we use that relationship between the self pairs to make sense of how all of the self pairs are connected? What's another pair? Whole and part. What if you had all of the parts? The greatest number of parts? Together at the same time as the greatest whole? Would that be a definition of a ultimate experience? So we can have fun going through. So that's the fun thing about the hypotheses of Parmenides. As soon as you grasp the nature of the relationship between the self pairs, whole, part, like, unlike, same, different, which are all the most primary units of thought. Everything that you've seen ever has either been a whole or a part, right? Everything you've seen has always been the same as something and different to something. These are the primary units of thought itself and creation itself. If you're creating something, doesn't it have to be a whole made up of parts? Don't you need the fundamental principles of sameness and difference for creation to create something different than your idea, than the model, but also for it to have a sameness to it, so it's a creation? So that's the self-logos. That's the highest use of understanding, or the highest use of the dialectic, the Parmenides hypotheses. Taking these primary units of thought, so thought, cognition, how we make sense of things, or reality. Those are the two. Ontology is what exists. Epistemology is how we know it. So those are the two fancy words used in philosophy. Things and relationships. What is the things and how do we know them? So the most primary units of those we call the selfers. That's the self-logos. That's what Parmenides uses to outline the whole map of everything. That's why the Parmenides is called the greatest book never read. It's the highest use of the dialectic to outline all possible ways of thinking and all possible dimensions of reality. Or all of the stages of evolution a human being can go through. So we take those basic units of thought, the self-logos, and for each different hypothesis, they're related in a different way. For example, the third hypothesis, that's the one that we are moving into in awakening understanding. The fourth hypothesis is the one we're stuck in. That's where the pathologos lives, group thinking. But the third is where we awaken providence, care, our guide. Why? Well, think about what we use as our model. Dream analysis. That's your spiritual guide. Hang on a second. Isn't it different to your waking life? In other words, while you're sleeping, you're having one thing, this divine intelligence that is crafting this whole universe to you to help you. My lighting's real crap today. Maybe I'm tired. I am tired. But then when you wake up, it's a different thing. It's one and then the other, except the relationship between your dreams and your waking world is providential. That's why we do dream analysis. You can only get that providence, that divine care, that divine benefit, if you unpack your dreams using the dialectic, using the logos, using dianoia. So, logos and providence are connected in the relationship between dreams and waking life. Or some intelligence that knows the whole of your life, knows your past, knows your present, knows your future, both your fate if you don't solve your problems and awaken midwifery and the love of understanding, or your destiny if you do wake up to the game. Where's mine?
You're a wizard, Harry.
Realize that this is the human quest.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
So there is something that you are being communicated from that knows the whole, or communicated to by, that knows the whole of it, of your life, the whole of your experience, knows who you were friends with in second grade. So you might have a dream about them. But then when you wake up, you experience not the whole, but the part. That's the third hypothesis. The whole in relation to the part providentially. The most ideal relationship from one to the other. That's what we are awakening in the love of understanding. That's how we get a guidance through all of them. That's the transition through all of the hypotheses. Which is why the only other model that we've come across that has a similar map of evolution or a map of spirituality is the 10 ox herding pictures in Buddhism. So stories of a man catching an ox and taming the ox and stuff to represent the spiritual journey. But they are different. The stages of the ox herding pictures are different than the Parmenides. And one of the reasons is the third hypothesis is where we get logos and providence needed to make a jump between each of the gaps, so you can put the third hypothesis in between all the other hypotheses. That's the significance of the love of understanding. Which means if Pierre Grimes left us a puzzle saying, hey, that first hypothesis, the one that transcends even existence, the self, the one self, Parmenides' hypotheses, there's something beyond it. If that's the case, and we have seen that the third hypothesis is the transitional stage between each of them, then we can grab the third hypothesis, the love of understanding, because that's how we unpack providence. That's how we get the connection from the whole to the parts, from the infinite to the limit, from the out of time to in time. We can grab that third hypothesis and plunk it on the top as a transition from the first two. What? Holy shit, that's a big one. If we as a species, thanks to the work by Dr. Grimes, and one Balboa who's actually translated the Parmenides for the first time in 1,000 years, if we are only just learning how to read the first hypothesis, and then Pierre Grimes leaves us post-mortem nen, to quote Hunter x Hunter, the most powerful kind of nen, a puzzle right before he passes on saying, hey, by the way, there's a level beyond the first. We've only just learned how to read the first, buddy. What's beyond that? Holy crap. But here's the thing. What we are learning here isn't the love of phronesis, philophronesis. It isn't the love of wisdom, philosophy, the second hypothesis. So the love of phronesis could be the way of describing the love of the being of self, or the first, that which transcends even the greatest experience, enlightenment experience, transcends that. Something has to have the enlightenment experience, right? That's you. Thus, the importance of removing your pathologos belief about yourself, because it's wrong. Literally, it can't be right because the self is literally beyond belief. It's beyond even knowledge. And knowledge is, if belief is the fourth hypothesis, then of course it's beyond belief. That's the absurdity of religion. Religion means to be bound by a saving belief. So you can't say you're a Christian. I mean, you can, but you're going to have problems. I am a Christian. Myself is a belief. Myself, which is the first hypothesis, is the fourth hypothesis. Wrong. Can't be. By definition, it's absurd. It's wrong. It's just incorrect. But of course it's incorrect. That's where we are as a species. And what we talked about today earlier was there was a survival benefit to having this false belief before we had language. And within our individual lives, before we had awoken language as a baby. As just a wee baby, like to speak. So, infinite and finite in the highest possible sense, united, second hypothesis. Third hypothesis, the logos, providence. Infinite, connected providentially to the finite. The divine connecting to you. Your daemon, your dream master connecting to you. Your midwife relationship with you. And that was my frustration after this stupid experience. Well, painful experience this evening playing music. My frustration was, growing up, I didn't have a midwife because that's what families are. There's no midwifery yet. Hopefully soon. Meaning the painful experiences become suffering experiences because you don't learn where you missed the mark. You don't learn what the problem was about. So you never turn your problems into puzzles. You never turn your suffering into simply pain. That's the frustration I was having last night. Got punched in the head by some jerk. But it's been a couple of hours and I have done some reflection myself with myself and my stuffies. Where are my One moment. Here we go. I could reflect with my stuffies, practicing midwifery to see what were the things that I missed and how do they relate to my personal problem. To put it briefly, how does that jerk face reflect my mother or father? Their way of being in the origin scene where they most fully express themselves. And my caveman brain mistook that for enlightenment. Mistook that for the second hypothesis. In other words, we are souls seeking the second hypothesis and the love of understanding to go beyond it, for us to get a pathologos. So a double-edged sword. But it also shows us that every single human problem is solvable, is rational. And that was the first chapter that we read in the book, where Pierre Grimes met up with Albert Ellis, who developed what we call today CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. What it's actually called, its formal name is cognitive emotive behavioral therapy, which slides in that word emotive to undercut the idea that all human problems are rational. And Pierre had a coffee with him. So when I say coffee, we have a little drink, and sometimes my little stuffy, a little, there we go, Swan Stuffy has a bit of a sip. Had coffee with Albert Ellis in, what's that place in New York called? Garden, something garden. Some famous coffee place in New York. I can't remember what it's called. Something gardens. Anyway, had a couple of chats with him and said, hey, by the way, you want to drop this cognitive emotive shit and actually understand that all, and actually tell the truth and say that all problems are understandable through the third hypothesis, or the love of dianoia, the love of understanding? And he said the same thing that all of these people say when Pierre meets them. They say, what's that over there? And then they run the other way. In other words, unless you're the sort of person who's in the game of midwifery, when somebody throws a logos-based question at you, you need to be a certain high class of character, truth-seeking above all else, to really even listen to the question. Especially if you're someone like Albert Ellis, who, has a position. I think he actually said that. He said, I think we read it in the first chapter. He said, what you are talking about, Pierre, is where my work is going, but I can't say that. I would lose my tenureship. I would lose my paycheck. I would lose my awards. I'd lose my job. So, see ya. Again, the theme of today. The love of understanding is rare, which can be puzzling for people who do love understanding. Can be lonely for those of us who live in Australia. But the flip side of that is, well, when there are people that cross our paths that do share a love of understanding, we value them more than anybody else could. And that's not just a romantic poem. That's something we can use understanding to lay out why that's the case. The most romantic statement ever. Let me lay out in understanding and the dialectic exactly why I will appreciate you more than any other person, my darling. As a joke. Doesn't sound very romantic, does it? But it's true. Anyway. So, that's my evening. And, right. And so, last episode, we did a review of everything up until now, up until chapter 5. And we had a look at a recent interview, this week's interview Jon Stewart had with somebody who is studying the genocide in Palestine against the Palestinian people. And they had questions because John and this other guy, Peter, are both Jewish. And they are very frustrated by the same thing we've been talking about today. How come no one wants to understand? And how come when we lay out the facts and reason, not only do they not care about understanding, they seem to viciously attack me. They call me a bad Jew. when it seems so fucking obvious to John that murdering children doesn't help anyone in any way and it's terrible and wrong? Why does he get attacked from saying something so obvious and basic? And that's what we've been talking about today. Why, as a philosopher in Australia, do I just simply say what seems obvious and beneficial? Hey, if you have a broken toaster, don't you want to understand why it's broken? Sure. And does it help you fix it? Sure. And if you had a false belief about why the toaster is broken, you could probably electrocute yourself trying to fix it that way? Of course I would. So understanding is great, right? Sure it is. Helps me fix my toaster. Oh, by the way, if you really understand your toaster, you could probably improve it. Set a timer on it. Maybe have set a timer for pancakes. Cook pancakes in your toaster. Wouldn't that be great? Absolutely. I love a pancake toaster. Can you improve your toaster if you have false beliefs? No. Can you do it if you understand electronics? Absolutely. Wow, so you love understanding. Absolutely love understanding when it comes to toasters. Because I can fix the problems with my toaster and I can improve my toaster. Make the ultimate toaster. Wow, you really love understanding. Yeah. What about you? What? I mean, you're more important than a toaster. Yeah. Then wouldn't you equally love understanding? Isn't that how you solve problems and actually reach your highest functioning? Fuck you. I'm going to kill you. What? How can you be so mature and rational about toasters, but so immature and irrational when something is so much more important? You. Your problems, your destiny, your highest functioning, your relationships, your meaning of life. And they say, take this. And they do a punch. And they say, it's an uppercut. Like, what? Toaster is a derogatory slur to AI. Ah, that's good. That's good. See, that's another thing. The people who do love understanding make better jokes. Most people would throw the toaster away, even if someone pointed out to them a YouTube video. Right, isn't that bizarre? Really? In Battlestar Galactica? Oh, interesting. Well, I mean, that's true about humor. Like, that's why the right wing can't have jokes, because they can't think. Because humor uses analogy. You see a connection analogously, and you point around it, or you point to another connection. So you're having fun with analogy. Analogy is the logos. Analogy means another logos. We've been talking, right, it's the essence of the divine. Well, we've been talking about how the third hypothesis, or logos, what we're learning, love of understanding, dianoia, is the transitional element between all of the hypotheses of Parmenides, all of the levels of thinking and being, all of the dimensions of reality. Not just in terms of thinking, like nihilism to materialism to dualism and so on and so on, but dimensions. There are different dimensions that people experience, mystics experience, philosophers experience. But the idea is, how do you make the jump? That's the logos. That's dianoia. That's why love of understanding is the best thing. Better even than love of wisdom. Better even than philosophy. Because it can go to philosophy, understand wisdom, and go beyond wisdom. But that's the logos, right? So how do we make the jump? Well, if you make the jump from one level of logos, that's what we've been talking about today, the same terms, whole and part, finite, infinite, same, different, and the other ones that are outlined in the Parmenides. Same terms, but used in a different way for each hypothesis. So the two that we were looking at today, The second hypothesis uses the ultimate of both of them together. The third hypothesis, understanding, uses one and then the other. In a providential connection. Now, it does have its reflection in the seventh hypothesis. That's good versus evil. So it's one and then the other connected in a negative way, in a warring way. That's the way of thinking that reality is a battleground between the forces of good and evil. That's the seventh hypothesis. So if you look at, do it on the board. Now we're not doing the hypotheses now, but I'll give you just a quick overview to talk about it here. Here's my pen. Here we go. So he gives the first. Oh, that's not very thick. So Parmenides gives the first hypothesis, which is the one self. That stands apart. That transcends everything. In Battlestar Galactica, toasters are way too sexy. Oh my goodness, what's happening in my chat? No one would ever throw those away, I thought. I empathize with Baltar to continue on with so much guilt he carries for the end of humanity. Who's Baltar? What wouldn't one do without a super hot girlfriend? Oh, it sounds like both of my chatters know Battlestar Galactica. What are you, beet farmers? I don't know that show. But I'm glad that you guys know it and you're connecting over it. So he says, hey look, this is the first hypothesis. He gives a dialectic within this. That's myself. From myself, of myself, that's the one self. And he actually explains this because Socrates asks for a demonstration of the dialectic. Because Parmenides said to him the same thing we are learning ourselves. If you want to know truth and you want to solve your problems, you have to awaken a love of understanding. What we call Philadionoia. That's the new art. That's the new art. Philadionoia. Love. Dianoia. Love of understanding. And he says to do that, you have to use the dialectic. That's what my student Zeno has been doing. So Socrates is about 20, Zeno is about 40, and Parmenides is about 60 at the time. And Socrates is young. He hasn't gotten into... need to have watched Battlestar Galactica to understand that one. What? Who wouldn't want to have a super hot girlfriend? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I guess you're right. Nobody... In the symposium, we'd ask, what level of hotness? Hotness of the body? Hotness of the soul? Hotness of the mind? Or is there a... Anyway, I'm getting off tangent. So you have to use the dialectic, Socrates, if you want to know the nature of truth. Like my student Zeno is doing. And Socrates is really clever and he goes, can you give me an example? Not a dialectic on beauty, not a dialectic on justice, which is what we do in the symposium and in the Republic, but on yourself. He shoots for the highest, which is one of the reasons why Socrates is so neat. And Parmenides laughs at him, Zeno laughs at him, and Socrates says, well, if you're going to laugh at me, I'm going to ask your student, hey, Zeno, you do it then. Do a dialectic on the self. And Zeno's like, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm not going to do that. I'm on your side. Let's get Parmenides to do it. In fact, I've been his student for a long time. I've only heard it once. So anyway, thankfully he asks him because Parmenides does it. He does a dialectic on himself. That's the first hypothesis. And he runs the youngest person there, which is a testament to the dialectic. If you really understand it, you should even be able to walk anyone through it. He says, hey, well, who's the youngest here? Aristoteles. Okay, I'm going to take you through it. So he goes through the whole first hypothesis, which we've done on this channel, by the way. It's done a while ago, but you can find it on YouTube. He goes, so what do you reckon? This pure one that I'm describing beyond even qualities, because hey, qualities are whole and part, right? But if you're a whole, doesn't it mean you're full of all of your parts? And isn't a part of a whole? But that's two things. That's not a pure one. So he goes through those categories, whole and part, same and different, like and unlike, by saying you can't have any of them in the way that we normally think about them. Because same doesn't have to be something the same as it. That's two things. I want a pure one. So he describes a pure one systematically. No analogy, no justification, just pure logic. And says that pure one we've described, that's myself. What do you think, Aristoteles? And Aristoteles goes, I don't reckon. What? I don't think that's likely. That this pure one is the one self? I don't think it's likely. All right then, son, says Parmenides. Now what's interesting, he doesn't midwife him. He says, you know what I'm going to do instead? I'm going to go through all possible other options. I'm going to run through 2, 3, 4, 5, and their denials 6, 7, 8, and 9. Because if you don't think that's likely, these are all of the other possibilities that can possibly exist. He goes through all other likely ideas and shows how they're all wrong, or they all fall short. They have to exist in a kind of a way, but they all fall short of the self. Giving us an entire map of every possible way of thinking, every possible state of feeling, every possible enlightenment experience that human beings progress through to reach our ultimate purpose, to know thyself, know the one self. Making it a complete map of human consciousness, of human history, of human evolution, making it the greatest book never read. It explains Christianity here and here hundreds of years before it was invented. If we read the book, someone could come along, I got this new idea, Christian. Oh, we know that. You don't have to do a crusades and kill people and torture women and burn women at the stake. You don't have to do any of that because we know where it is. We've understood that way of thinking if we read the book. Now, we can read the book now because we have the Balboa translation and we have the art of philosophical midwifery to unblock us, because if this is a mastery of the logos, then we will surface all of our problems, meaning we have to be doing midwifery too. Anyway, what we are talking about is the third hypothesis, whole and part in a good way, providentially. That's dianoia, that's the dialectic. But its denial is the seventh hypothesis, whole at war with the parts, good versus evil. Sound like any of the major religions that control the world at the moment? That are actively seeking Armageddon and the destruction of our planet because they believe the seventh hypothesis, that Earth is a battleground between the forces of war and of good and bad, which is why every single war done in the name of profiteering, the very first thing they do is say, hey, these bad guys, they're not human beings like us. What did the Jews call the Palestinians? Savages. What did the Nazis call the Jews? Vermin. What did the Americans call the Iraqis when they went over to murder them? Sand monkeys. What did the white Americans call the black Americans to justify the oppression of them? Apes. Why? Because the very first thing you have to do to justify harming other human beings is pretend they can't have reason. You can't reason with the devil, you can only shoot him. You can't reason with vermin, you can only exterminate them. You can't reason with savages, you can only enslave them. You can't reason with the savage Palestinians, you can only genocide them. Bull fucking shit. All human problems are caused by ignorance that you solve with understanding. That's the movement from the fourth hypothesis into the third. The lie that justifies atrocities is the seventh, which is the third worst. Nihilism is the ninth, it's the worst. There isn't even that. Nothing exists. It's saying, hey, those self-logos pairs, infinite, finite, whole, part. How about there is no part and there is no whole? Everything is the matrix. Everything is illusion. Everything is Maya. Nihilism. That's the worst. That's the saddest state of feeling. That's the most empty you'll feel. That's the most lonely you feel. That's the most feeling like you want to give up. Which is why, whatever level everyone in chat is at, simply by having this conversation, you have the skills to benefit the soul of someone in the ninth. Why? Because you understand them. Even if you're just using whole and part. We can add, we talked about infinite and finite today as well. At least you know that the worst position is to deny the existence of either of them. Nihilism. And you know that that's the worst situation now. By the way, it's also the shortest section in the Parmenides. So maybe we can run through it tomorrow or something. It's only like a page long, so it's the easiest one to do. Can't get the picture to auto display on Discord, but I've got a link with a picture of a toaster Battlestar Galactica. Oh no, is it non-safe for work? Because that's what I want to see. Oh. Come on.
Disgusting. I'm so disgusted.
Disgusting. So, at least you know this. You know enough to recognize the ninth hypothesis, even as a loose hypothesis. And you can meet this person and say, hey, you know enough about philosophical midwifery is you're not telling them anything. You're definitely not blaming or punishing them. You want to turn their problems into puzzles through creating the most ideal conditions for self-reflection. You ask them questions. That's it. As charmingly as you can, with as much humor as you can, with as much reference to weird toaster porn as you can. Whatever makes it fun and interesting and charming. That's up to you. But in that conversation, you can ask them a couple of questions. Hey, by the way, are we talking? Like, are we at least understanding each other? So that at least that exists. By the way, am I different from you? So at least there's difference. So that has to be something, because same and different is one of those two pairs. Whole and part, infinite, finite, same, different. Oh, so different exists. That's something, right? And we can understand each other. So there's something universal that we can both share in for us to even have this conversation. And it kind of feels good, doesn't it? Oh, isn't that interesting? You can have that conversation. And what's interesting about the ninth hypothesis is you need that conversation to get out of it. That's the human evolution in this. That's the human element in our evolution. There are certain hypotheses that require somebody else to come into their life and say, hey, by the way, let's talk. Let's have a coffee. And just that might be enough. At least there's difference. And at least there's something we can both apprehend for us to have a conversation. Out of the 9. You've helped us all. Well, and whatever that's worth at the end of your life, when wherever we go, if there's any process of reflection on what we did here, you've benefited us all. That's got to be worth something, right? Anyway, we can all do that. And as we go through this process, we go back into the Parmenides, and as my board takes a while to catch up to, there we go. We can have a lot of fun because, by the way, what are we learning here? What's the love of understanding? The dialectic. Can we fit the dialectic within these 4 categories? And by the way, when you do a dialectic, don't you have to do it on what if the idea exists? For instance, if we get into the symposium, we talk about, well, we're learning about the nature of beauty itself. Because that's the yoga that Socrates went through. His female teacher, Diotima, led him through the stages of beauty to have the enlightenment experience of beauty itself. Self itself. So we're going to be learning about that in the symposium, but everything that we pick out from the book, all of the key terms, you want to arrange it. That's your puzzle. That's the practice of the dialectic. Now, we use the dialectic to help people, like we just talked about, meeting nihilists, but we also use it for our own understanding, because the dialectic isn't just how we help others, it's also the spiritual process. It's a meditation. Sustained focus on something that exists in real being, meaning you can end up unifying with it because you're naturally curious about it. You don't need a koan. What is the sound of one hand clapping? You don't have to develop your focus by sitting on a mat for 4 days because you're just focused on your dialectic. It's naturally interesting. And you're reading a book that is fun anyway. And it's a sustained focus on an object that is knowable, because that's nous. Meaning your sustained concentration, which is meditation, can evolve from concentration to meditation to contemplation when you can join with the object. That's one of the functions of dialectic, dianoia. So, as you piece together the things that you're learning about beauty that exists in being, you arrange it. Hey, what can you say about beauty itself? If it exists in being? What can you say, self in relation to itself? What can you say about beauty, how it functions? How does beauty function within the other ideas in being, or how does it function in reality? By the way, how do people affected by beauty relate to others? By the way, having been affected by people like that, how do they then relate back to beauty? We've encapsulated all of the possible ways of talking about beauty. But you also have to create a universe of what if it doesn't exist? You gotta create like that Marvel animated thing, that what if universe. What if Spider-Man had the thing, and what if Spider-Man was actually a zombie? Or what if beauty didn't exist? What could you say about it? It's an illusion. How does it function? Tricks people. How do people, having been tricked, relate to each other? They, I don't know, use the image of beauty to sell Coca-Cola or something. Then how do people, having experienced all of that beauty that doesn't really exist, what do they say about beauty? How do they relate back to beauty? They don't. They say, oh, beauty is just in the eye of the beholder. What's beautiful to some is ugly to others. There is no beauty. Something like that. Well, I think that everyone can agree that toasters are beautiful. Right, so what category would you put toasters? Do toasters participate in the beauty of reality because beauty exists as an aspect of the second hypothesis of pure beauty, of pure being? And therefore, beauty emanates for us to, beauty functions to inspire toaster makers? Or is it in this category where beauty doesn't exist, it's a trick used to sell toasters? That's the fun of the dialectic. You can populate it with ideas that are relevant to you. Because you have this weird, creepy thing about toasters, you can talk about toasters in one of these categories. It's yours. It's your dialectic. Or you could use only the ideas from the text, and then once you have a complete dialectic, 8 categories, 4 if it does, 4 if it doesn't exist in being, then you can create a mythology, which is take your 8 paragraphs and take all of the terms about beauty or existence or reality or the soul and create an analogy with or a metaphor to an object. Create a story about a weird chatter who falls in love with a toaster and has half bred, half human children. But the toaster represents beauty. The perverted chatter represents justice, maybe. How does justice relate to beauty? Is justice beautiful? If you find something beautiful that isn't just, is it no longer beautiful? That's your actual exploration, but your mythology is how you create a story to share that idea. Make it fun. I'm perfect proportions in every possible way. Oh, goodness. I'm referring only to main characters of Battlestar Galactica, which is a robot in the shale of Magnificent Blonde. Oh, all right. So the toaster becomes a magnificent blonde lady. With big boobs. The toaster blonde hair. Red lips. Blue eyes. Baby. There's your toaster, baby. There's your toaster woman. Now, what's interesting is this Battlestar Galactica episode that you write will have a philosophical significance. Toaster and human blasphemy. Sorry, that's my dad coming out. Damn. Your dad's speciesist. He's an anti-android. One of those people. He was from a different generation. Well, we've got a link on the Discord. What a toaster look like. Woof. Okay. Alright. That's a toaster? Wow. Alright. You've sold me. I will join your Pornhub network, if that's what you're talking about. But the difference is, when you write this episode, you have already equated each of these terms to an aspect of the key ideas of your dialectic that you did first. making it a puzzle. You are like Socrates or Plato. You've created a work of mythology or work of philosophical significance that if people apply themselves to it, they can unpack the mystery and realize, hey, the way in which this guy relates to the toaster woman actually represents what you discovered from the symposium of how justice relates to beauty, or how ousia relates to beauty, or how beauty relates to the soul of a philosopher. Meaning, this love of understanding, that is your way of understanding the evolutionary process through the 9 hypotheses of Parmenides. It's your yoga for your own enlightenment when you read the symposium and you arrange it in this dialectic, sustained concentration on a focus, sustained focus or sustained concentration into meditation with your highest vision, with your highest open-mindedness, highest curiosity, seeking truth on an object that is knowable. Therefore, you can upgrade from meditation to contemplation. So the dialectic is your spiritual method. As we talked about today, relating to someone in the 9th hypothesis, it's your way of helping, your way of sharing benefit in the world through conversation, but it's also a way of creating art that is itself beneficial. You're giving clues about the most beneficial thing, the dialectic, applied to something true, beauty. Meaning, this love of understanding, or the dialectic, Philadionoia, is something you can be doing at all times. Which means you can desire it with the desiring part of your soul. You can outwardly, so desiring is the inward desire. You can outwardly move. You can seek dialectical conversations. You can seek to create these sort of episodes. And it can be the object for your reasoning. So you can unify all three aspects of your soul on a single activity. And if you can do it at all times, that's justice. Doing it at all times, in public or at private. That's what we read from Book 4 in the Republic. Which also means you have a guide for your midwifery. Why? Because if this is the most important thing, the evolutionary process, the learning process, the helping others process, the creating good art process, the spiritual process, then all you got to do is look out for when you're not doing the dialectic, and you've got a problem. You've got a clue about what you're here to solve about your pathologos. And what we read in Book 4 is, as you practice this, you'll notice yourself getting into a flow state where it becomes effortless and automatic. Only what you're applying this flow state to isn't shooting basketball hoops. Like sometimes athletes get into a flow state maybe once or twice in their career. If they're lucky, pitching a perfect game or something, you're applying that flow state, that state of excellence of the self, to a meaningful activity. That's a higher level of functioning. Isn't that neat? And if it's something you can do all the time, when the game ends, then that basketball player is out of his flow state, you don't have to end the game. It's not my type of content. That type of content. In the story, she's just a spy from the Cylons, the androids which liberated themselves from humans. She seduces a high-ranking official and pretty much brings almost total destruction of mankind. She actually has quite a deep character. Interesting. Does she get naked though? Can you show me this part of the story? For dialectical reasons only. So that's that flow state, which is a level of development. A higher level of development is applying it to something meaningful. This. And if it's something you can be doing at all times, why come out of it? Why not use that flow state to go beyond? Go from the third to the second. And why not go even beyond that? And then we even mentioned today that Pierre Grimes left us a puzzle. There might even be a hypothesis beyond the first. Which is wild because it took us 99 years to catch up to his like he was 99 when he passed on, or 98 or 99. He was teaching right till the end. Teaching us specifically how to read the first hypothesis. Amazing dude. No explicit nudity unless there is an episode of the show that I missed. Well, if there's somebody who knows it, it's the other weirdo in chat. If you've missed an episode like that. I would have been extremely frustrated to miss that one. Oh my goodness. So, what were we talking about? Talking about how do we get onto the hypotheses? Right, so this love of understanding that's rare is what's needed for us to reflect on ourselves and find what binds us to the shackles of groupthink. Because this is also the historical. You could think of epochs of humanity within this as well. Make this jump. The third. Love of understanding. Right, so with all of that review of everything, let's jump on in to the midwife talk that we've been exploring in the book. Someone who's been in this kind of a relationship for 2 whole years and he's still getting insights about his puzzle. Oh yeah, we got into this because when I got into the situation, I was frustrated because what's needed to take our problems into puzzles or our suffering into just pain, or in other words, to make everything a learning experience, is someone in the third. Because third is characterized by logos and providence, or understanding and care. And the more we learn the dialectic, the more we can facilitate that in others and ourselves. How do we reflect on our experiences so we can see that it's always a clue? It's always a clue about our problem or a clue about our highest destiny. In other words, see the justice behind the apparent injustice. That's needed for learning. That's needed for learning in our own relationship, in our own lives, but also in humanity. That's why
no one seems to be learning or growing or addressing actual problems.
No one seems to be learning or growing or addressing actual problems, because that's where we're moving into. From the fourth into the third. What do you say, Emma?
I'm cute. Like, it's cutie pie.
Not relevant, but I get your point. Okay, so we are in, these are 5-minute increments of a midwife talk, and we are at increment 11 of 17, where he's been guided through again. So this is, I think, Pierre Grimes, the author of this book, providing that relationship, providing that ideal conditions for reflection on our experiences to gain insight. In other words, do what we're here for, our purpose. Everything we're having is for a reason. This is how we get the reason. So he's doing that. He's facilitating. But again, it takes a long time. Not for everyone. Depending on how much you love understanding, how gung-ho you are. So if you fixate on something, if that's the kind of ADHD you've got, then fixate on this and you can move quickly. Which is why, even though it was a long night, a weird night, I'm still doing this. I'd rather spend my time decompressing doing this than, I don't know, anything. It's fun. And good people here too. So, minute 11 in his review of a certain key scene with his father, his early teacher. Our parental figures are early teachers. They're working on the lawnmower, and he's recalling what his father said. "You don't know how to work on small things," says Papa. He knows that it was necessary for his father to admit he'd made a mistake. I'm losing my voice. After coming to that conclusion, Subject B says quickly, "I wouldn't have made a big deal out of it, since he got the lawnmower so damn cheap. Who gives a shit? We had a lot of fun." But with further reflection that we have guided him through as a midwife, he realizes that for his father to acknowledge that, he would have had to admit his own mistake. And in doing so, in admitting he made a mistake, he would be preserving a new, mature way of relating to his son, which is good. A new way of being. Honesty, openness, equality, reflection. B says, that's the only way it's going to make anything worthwhile. Otherwise, the whole thing here, that's going to be love. This whole thing here, his father undermining him, mocking him, laughing at him when the lawnmower went backwards, saying, you don't know how to fix things. You can't work on small things. He either would have had to admit his mistake, he picked the wrong mower because he was a cheapskate, and he's been blaming his son, or this rare display of affection, because his father wasn't around when he was doing well, becomes his model of love. I've been talking a lot about the symposium and the true nature of beauty and love. But this is the other side of it. This is the pathologo side of it. It's from these scenes that we get our model of love. And who the hell wants that kind of love? Love without understanding is that sound effect. Loud enough? Whoops. It became clear that through this lawnmower event, he had what appeared to him as a meaningful relationship with his father. He remembers that they related as if they were equals, but then he exclaimed, "The consequence of taking the blame. My whole being is something wrong with it." We take the blame to save our loved ones when they play out this bullshit, pretending to be a knower when they're not, doing the same injustice that they likely suffered themselves, going all the way back to the cave, while acting as though they're justified. I get to be king. I get to be king priest of the family. His whole life, he believes there's something wrong with himself, his way of being. It's like, I'm just a kid. I'm no longer equal. Trying to recall the event once more, he remarks his father might have made the statement. You don't know how to work on small things. After he had taken the... Wait a minute. Trying to recall the event once more, he remarks his father might have made that statement, hey, you don't know how to work on small things, after he'd taken the fucking lawnmower apart. I don't know why I'm swearing there. I'm trying to emphasize the story. Oh, don't need to do that. And that would have hurt worse, because he had laid out that he has been able to work on these small things. He had taken it apart, and there is obvious truth, obvious proof. So it would have hurt more. So not only is there a problem with his way of being, there's a problem with his way of perceiving reality, because it's laid out and his father still says you can't work on small things. This is what we get. We all get this. You undermine our way of being, you undermine our way of thinking, even our perception of reality. That distorts our whole way of being until we go through this process and figure out where we picked it up. For subject B, it was this lawnmower scene. But we all get it. So, we do our best to have fun and learn this art of self-reflection for ourselves, for our chat, and hopefully model this way of being for everybody else in the world. And maybe, just maybe, we can turn this ship around and have a lot of fun in the process. I'm losing my voice, so we'll get back into this review of a midwifery session next time. And maybe we'll get into the symposium. We seem to be talking about it a lot. Either that or Jesus and Socrates, a dialogue in heaven. I don't know. Hey, why not both? I'll have a think about it. Thank you once again for joining me. Thanks for the weird, perverted, toaster-related chat. Lots of fun. Of course, everything had a philosophical meaning behind it. We're very sophisticated weirdos and creeps. But yeah, thanks once again. Thanks for joining me here. Thanks for helping me reflect on my experience tonight. That was a meaningful thing too. And I will see you all in the next one. Oh, and by the way, the last episode where we reviewed the Jon Stewart interview, it's been blocked from YouTube. As my first React thing that I've ever done. So I don't know if that's a normal thing. I think Paramount or something like that automatically blocks it, even though it was at 1.5 speed and I paused it a lot. Maybe that's just you can't do reacts to certain kinds of things. It's on Twitch for a week. I'm not affiliate yet, so my VODs only stay up for a week. But you can check it out there. Where we review my first react of Jon Stewart. Otherwise, I might re-upload it, but take out the video and the audio. Maybe just leave the subtitles on. I'll figure something out. But yeah, check it out on the VOD for a week. And I will see you in the next one. Press button. Press the button. There we go. See you in the next one.